I'm really, Hi everybody, I'm really pleased to introduce Joe Murphy from the Yale Science Library. He's probably one of the biggest names in international library circles on mobile technology. Everything from mobile reference to other services on mobile devices. He's a recent graduate of, I think, University of Hawaii, and he's been named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker, and he's done a lot of speaking and writing on mobile technology and has been a keynote at our Handheld Librarian Conference. So welcome, Joe, and we're really glad to have you. I know how busy you are.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you guys tonight. So if we might get started. I appreciate that introduction, and you mentioned that I speak a lot, and I wanted to let you know that I speak a lot and do these engagements because it's really beneficial for me. So one of the things I'm hoping to get out of this evening's event is to hear your feedback and your input, not just so I can learn, although that's critically important, but also so I can make sure that I'm keeping my pulse on the information industry. See what you guys are thinking, what your reactions are to these ideas. Now, along with this, I actually want to make a small excuse for myself in that I've been trying to get over a cold. I've been getting over it for a week. So if my voice gets a little bit weak, please understand that. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. Now, I saw a little bit of mention in the chat window of my Twitter hook, Library Future, and I can recognize a few of your names that I'm already following. And if there's anyone here who's a Twitter user that I'm not connected with, please connect with me and I'll make sure that I follow you back. It'd be really great if we could connect and continue the dialogue beyond this. So recently, we've seen a huge explosion of mobile technologies and their popularity across demographics and across age groups, globally, within demographics of all our library patron groups. And they're quickly becoming very interesting tools whose roles are expanding in the use of information, in sharing information, accessing it, engaging it, and even contributing and creating it. And so because of this, us librarians are responding to this trend by ourselves engaging with these technologies and figuring out the best ways to bring it into our libraries. It's fun, but it's hard. Thinking about the best ways can be a bit difficult for us information professionals who are trained to think about things in a very certain set of ways, where this mobile technology trend may be impacting and actually changing a lot of the ways we do or want to be engaging with information. Now, mobile technology is basically the body of handheld portable devices or tools, resources, or gadgets that we see out there. I often forget to give an introduction at all to what mobile technology is, but understand that the scope of this talk, of our conversation tonight, is going to be on not just how technologies are changing and the stronger influence and impact of mobile devices, but also that there's a mobile culture developing. Now, the examples for these devices would be, for instance, cell phones, smartphones like the iPhone or the Nexus 1, e-reading devices from the Kindle to the Nook to the iPad to other tablet computers, iPods, etc. This variety of mobile technology is constantly growing and expanding. But I personally think it's really important to note that the mobile technology extends well beyond the actual gadgets into our culture and behavior, creating its own culture, and that culture affecting our technological and information habits beyond that. This is really the focus for libraries. Now, this happens in a lot of ways. Everything from sharing to communication norms are changing, and the expectations for both of those. Not only expectations, but the judgments upon, and the understanding of, and the applications for. It even touches things not related at all to mobile technology, like physical body language within our conversations. What's appropriate as far as multitasking in person. and the way we use the physical spaces we're in. Not just how we tend to group around outlets in the wall, but also what we tend to do with our mobile gadgets where we go. Our hierarchy of behaviors. The first thing we do when we get somewhere may now be checking into Foursquare. But most importantly, it's affecting our expectations for every aspect of not just information engagement, but of our lives. And it's this area that librarians can focus on and put our creativity in to really moving forward. Now, I envision the framework for mobile libraries as being this triumvirate of three major areas for considerations. This is how I conceive of the mobile library, made up of these three distinct concepts that come together to form the complete mobile library. And these concepts are the technologies themselves, and this includes the gadgets, as I mentioned, and the culture, which I would like to emphasize. It also includes everything for the librarians. Grouped under mobile literacy, this is the skills we have or we need, our behaviors, our roles, and our job duties. It also has to touch upon that human side of it, that librarians were people and we have a context we come from, and that is actually the trickiest but most important consideration for us to keep in mind as we go forward with this change. The third part of that is going to be the practical considerations. This is like the real world side of this. But it has to be given attention independently, not just because management of mobile library technologies requires slightly different considerations and the people within them, but also because we have to make sure that we're doing it well and that we're thinking it out beforehand. So we're knowing what practical and management considerations to keep in mind so that as we design and implement our mobile services, we know what it's going to look like in the future and what challenges we can expect to encounter. So I hope that makes sense to everyone besides just me. But I do think that it's important for you guys to remember that it's not just about the technologies, and it's not just about the practical side of making it work, but those two coming together with mobile literate librarians putting in our real information expertise into designing and guiding the framework for information engagement within the mobile sphere. So jumping into the technology itself, I think it's really important for us to become familiar with the major mobile technologies. I say major because there's two different things we need to consider, the trend itself and the technologies, which we can't be aware of all of them, so we choose the most influential ones. Even though I said it's probably the least important of the three factors, it's absolutely still critical. So if we're familiar with the technologies, we'll do a little bit of getting familiar with them today, but hopefully we'll leave you with skills to pursue that on our own as well. Then we can begin to, in earnest, explore the possible applications for different library settings. Combining that with mobile literacy, we'll really be able to come up with some great stuff. So let's spend a little bit of time digging into the major technologies. Now, I like to break this down into these two classes of the current technologies that are hot on the landscape now and the emerging technologies that, even though they're on the horizon, we see them emerging and can envision. So the difference is going to be envisioning possible or potential uses of emerging technologies versus sustaining or adopting current uses or adapting of technologies that we've seen really proliferate already. So I'm going to spend some time going through each of these, and once I'm done, I want you to be thinking about the ones I may have missed. And then at the end, include that in your questions. Ask me why I didn't bring up X, Y, or Z, or why I specifically focused on these. Now, text messaging. It's been the bastion of mobile technology for a long time, and it will continue to be. I think that's because it's one of the most universal mobile technologies across different types of cell phones around the world as far as uses and usage. It continues to be one of the biggest used functions of cell phones in almost all demographics. And because of this, it's also been seen as a great way to enhance communication between the library and our patrons. Now, a lot of the rhetoric about text messaging is about millennials or teenagers. And they are very heavy users of this, but it's not just them. In fact, when I look at my phone bill, I see that I actually tend to use text messaging more than your average millennial, and not that much more than demographics in just a generation or a half a generation older than me. We see this as being really universal, but we don't see the acceptance of it within our profession as being universal. I encounter a lot of resistance when I talk about the importance of text messaging. And I think that's all based on a very relevant and valid fear of people who are not familiar with it, not really knowing how, or thinking that there might be a problem with them engaging the phone, whether through a traditional number pad or a full QWERTY keyboard, to type out messages. And that's fair enough. You can't blame people for that, because we all are going to have a fear for a new technology. But what we can do is engage the technology and test out those fears. Because when I do training for things like reference with text messaging, I find that people's fears and inability, or their potential inability, to type on a phone is much less than they had feared at first. So anyone who is not familiar with text messaging, just think of it as the sending of really simple, brief, always less than 160 character messages that are based on text between cell phones. It goes through the cell phone service. The traditional way is from phone to phone, peer to peer that way. But there's technologies that allow us to engage text messaging from beyond a phone. Now, because of its popularity, because of its usefulness as a communication mode, and also because of its potential applications for engaging with information, sharing information, or putting the expertise of that librarian within the mobile information flow of our patrons, we've been able to apply it to reference services. Now, in late 2007, I implemented a popular text messaging reference program here at the Yale Science Libraries. And through the coverage we got from that, we've really set off a firestorm of popularity for this kind of service across the world in libraries. And we've seen libraries do great things with this. What we did is we purchased an Apple iPhone so we could directly have librarians answering text messaging reference questions with the same technology coming in from our patrons. We did this because we wanted to make sure that gap between librarians and the patrons was minimal. If we use the same technology, we didn't have to fear a gap in communication norms and expectations, and understanding of what the process was like, etc. It also was the most efficient with the quickest response time, and it was quite cheap actually considering the other options. But there are other options. In fact, there is a free option of answering incoming text messages with instant messaging, or now it's really easy to use Google Voice for this. Some of the other popular things have been to use SMS to email conversion software so that librarians can receive it as an email and then respond that way. That really decreases the learning curve for librarians. There's also been a popular product put out by Mozilla called Text to Librarian, where librarians actually engage it through a web portal. So it's kind of like an old school chat room where you see a message come in and you respond directly on the web page. And that's a proprietary product that, if you figure out the costs, all the costs involved, it's actually the most expensive. It's more expensive than using an iPhone, including purchasing the device and the monthly subscription fees, etc. But everything comes with a cost. Now, the free method that I talked about, having text messages converted to IM, does not come with a technology cost per se. But never think that something is free. Any new technology or service we create requires heavy investment in staff time and resources. And as Lori's pointing out in the chat window, the very popular and very successful MyInfoQuest service does in fact use that SMS to email conversion software so that librarians anywhere can engage it. It's really great. It includes a lot of the best features for what we need to consider for best practices for text messaging reference. Now, the screenshot I include here on the left side of this is one of the times that I was interacting with Cha-Cha, which is a public, free, non-library related SMS answer service. And I really like this because it's quick, it's easy, it's 24 hours, but it's not answered by librarians. So I always have to deal with the trade-off of, do I want the answer immediately, anytime, which I cannot get from most libraries at this point, or do I need the expertise? Like with Google and Wikipedia, that convenience often wins out. Jumping over to Twitter. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm still talking about Twitter in 2010. But whereas Twitter has been around for a while, because of its versatility, it's going to continue to be a very important facet of mobile technology. It emerged in 2007, gained lots of popularity in 2008, and I think really became the standard in late 2009. Now in 2010, we see Twitter being engaged across the board. We see new uses of it, and it's great for libraries. It's incredibly simple, has very few features, but it's very powerful for connecting and being able to provide information services and information itself. Now, the screenshot I included here is from the Sesame Street Twitter account, which is hilarious. If you don't follow it, you totally should. Every time I get one of Cookie Monster's tweets, it cracks me up. But the reason I use this as an example is because this account very cleverly uses some of the best practices and best methods for having a successful Twitter account. Most of them, but not all of them. They have a human side, they have an informative side, they're interactive, but it's not the best model for libraries because it's not meant to be an access point. But by definition, anything that may be a communication mode for a library will be, and patrons will come in to ask questions. Thus, every time a library considers pursuing Twitter as a service, whether or not we want to, we have to be prepared, for instance, for using it as a reference service. So it has long-lasting implications. Now, the most obvious use of Twitter is to broadcast news, announcements, events, etc. But it really is great for having interactive services or for bolstering collections, for enhancing instruction. The uses are really only limited by our creativity and our ability to put resources behind that. And we have to be able to allocate those resources and staff time and expertise because we have to make sure the services are very quality. Now, mobile web pages are receiving a lot of hype nowadays. It's pretty much just maximizing a web page for a mobile browser so that it can really bring the web page, the content, or the library's web presence anywhere. Anywhere where there's an internet-enabled cell phone or mobile device, for instance. Now, I included a screenshot of TechCrunch's mobile page here because it combines the need for simplicity within a mobile page with the full-featuredness that we come to expect. I actually very rarely prefer a mobile page as opposed to just viewing the standard page because we tend to lose features in it as it gets shrunk down or as it gets simplified. And so, as libraries consider this, there's a lot of trade-offs to be balanced. There's a lot of priorities that have to be figured out ahead of time. For instance, if we're going to make a mobile-friendly page, where do we gear it towards? Do we make it universal and generic so that it can be viewable on the most possible smartphones or mobile devices? If we do that, it has to be the most basic. But it may be more valuable to have a stronger one that's best viewed on Safari on the iPhone as well as on Android phones. But we have to put in time to develop each of those. When I'm speaking with library systems or vendors pursuing this, I usually advise that if they have the resources, they make a specific one for the iPhone for each of the top 3 or 4 major mobile carriers, and then also a generic one so that everyone gets the maximized experience. Now the problem is there's a bit of a competition because if we want to make the presence and resources available to smartphones, then it may be a little bit more important to pursue mobile applications as opposed to mobile web pages, or to enhance them. But if we're going to be pursuing both, that's yet again more services, more points that are going to demand resources and more time, none of which we have in abundance. So flipping over to mobile applications, they're simply small pieces of downloadable software that can be customized for individual resources that we can choose to put or purchase on our smartphones. The screenshot here is just a list of some of the most popular reference applications for the iPhone, for instance. Now, the good thing about mobile applications is that they can be very strong and fully featured. They can be designed to have all of the features of the traditional library web presence and services packed into a small bundle. Now, the problem, the major barrier, is that creating them requires quite a bit of coding skill that librarians do not traditionally have, that most people do not have. And then it's not something we can just make and put up. We have to go through an approval process with Apple, etc. It also costs a lot of money. It literally does cost money to go through submitting it, but also it costs a lot of money in whether hiring an outside consultant or paying staff to do this instead of our traditional jobs. But its strengths usually make it worthwhile. The big question here, though, is what platform should we be developing mobile applications for? Now, the obvious answer is usually the iPhone, and I think it should be. But the problem is the iPhone does not have a majority of the market share. It's not the most popular, even though it almost is, and it's not universal. But it is the most powerful and has the most widely accepted brand behind it. And that alone is a very important reason to pursue it. But again, you can't have a full mobile strategy if you're only gearing towards one device. So if we're going to also do it towards other devices, we have to make separate applications that function independently for multiple platforms. That requires a huge commitment of resources. Now, the question then is, who's going to do that and with what resources? Is it going to be the traditional librarians? Well, we don't have the skills for that now. Is it going to be the webmasters? They're doing other things. Usually, what libraries are doing is looking outside and paying for people to do it for now. But I foresee that in the near future, probably the next year or so, we're going to see a big change in that. We're going to see more libraries making simpler applications with the canned template type of application services. Or we're going to see the process become easier and have it be incorporated into a more traditional technical skill for librarians. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Jumping over to e-readers. Although this is kind of one of the hottest topics, to me it's the most boring. And I'll tell you why. Because smartphones already are a universal device as far as features, and it seems silly for a lot of people who use their one device for everything to want to then go out and engage another device. Problem is, that only accounts for the people who are only concerned with having one device. So there's a lot of great e-readers out there, as you've all known and as you hear about all the time. The Kindle is fabulous. Barnes & Noble's Nook is great. The Ilix, Sony's devices, and now, of course, the iPad. Now, it's really fun to see how we're able to bring digital books to people and how that enhances our experience and expands our reach. But it's really difficult for libraries to envision our role in this. What I mean by this is that we traditionally have a collection that we control, and that collection is the medium for engaging that information. But with mobile ebooks, it's a whole different story. And there's not yet been a successful way that libraries have been able to plug into this flow. For instance, I do a lot of reading on my Amazon Kindle app on my iPhone. And the way to get content there is through the Amazon Kindle store. If I could check out books from my library, I would prefer to do that. But since it's so easy with the Kindle app, I'm willing to pay that little bit of money for something that's better than free. For instance, that $5.99 is worth it to me because I don't have to go through the hassle of trying to engage a library with my engage a book with my library, and that goes from everything from searching for it to accessing it to lugging it around. That convenience of using it on a mobile device trumps all. A lot of libraries, though, are pursuing some interesting ways to address this. Some libraries are checking out Kindles. A lot of libraries are trying to figure out how to make their existing digital content available for multiple mobile devices. Now, we do see, though, that there's a big gap, a big divide in understanding what the focus should be. Should it be on making our content available to multiple mobile devices and working with vendors to do that? Or B, to focus on the technology itself? Of course, the success is going to lie in a bit of both, and I probably shouldn't be a hardliner in my opinion. That's then we should focus on the content and making that versatile. Now, we do see a lot changing, though. We see people's acceptance and behavior of e-readers really changing as we've seen the Kindle become so popular and now the iPad. And I think that this is no longer something that's going to be an intellectual question for us, but a make or break for our success question that we have to address right now. And that we is going to be all of us here, us who are now in a position to be leading change in libraries over the next coming years. So let's make sure that we have an understanding of what the challenges are so that we can move forward with positive change. Now, something I didn't cover, but I like to mention, or I think needs mention, are other social networks beyond Twitter that are mobile friendly, like Facebook, for instance. Because as popular as Twitter is, there's actually more mobile users of Facebook than there are users of Twitter on toto. And so there's a lot of avenues for us to consider here. Back in, let's see, about this time last year, I was preparing a poster that I was able to share at the American Library Association conference, where I outlined the major technologies facing libraries last year. Now, I'm going to post the link for the poster over here so we can look at it while I'm mentioning this. In this poster, I mentioned, of course, text messaging, different ways we can make our electronic collections available through mobile devices, different ways we could enhance the user experience with all the functions of a library from circulation to account manipulation through mobile devices, and social networking with a primary focus on Twitter and Facebook as well as mobile applications. And I've covered most of those here, but I often like to think, what would I do differently now? What are the technologies that are important or changing or moving up in the world in 2010? So let's jump into that. Now, it's really hard to take a look and see what technology is going to be doing, what changes are going to become important. But as people who keep our finger on the pulse of technology, it's not impossible as long as we're willing to take a risk, take a gamble in looking at what the new technologies might be, and being willing and understanding that they may or may not pan out. Now, QR codes is a fun one. QR codes are just two-dimension scannable barcodes that we can read on our smartphones. Here on this slide, I have an image of actually my QR code that I generated, and it contains just my contact information. So if you have an appropriate app on your smartphone for reading QR codes, if you go ahead and give it a scan, it'll come up with my name and contact information and a bit of a blurb. So I include this on my websites, on my business cards, in my email signature, things like that, because what the benefit it has for me is being able to directly engage the information within my mobile phone without ever having to leave it. I can scan someone's QR code and immediately have it within my contact list. I don't have to go through the physical steps of looking at the business card and inputting it. But that's my own take. There's a lot of really great benefits for this in a lot of library applications, whether it's enhancing the physical space, giving directions, making announcements, or enhancing collections. A very large trend that I see happening this year is going to be enabling our physical presences, not just library, but the whole concept of a physical place, to be able to mash up well with our digital and mobile world. And QR codes is a great bridge to that, since these codes can include any information we want to put in them to have lots of potential for us. I'm going to jump over now to augmented reality, which is really exciting and very powerful and not as intimidating as you may suspect. It's simply putting a layer of digital information over our view of the physical world. So for instance, we can have programs that when we take a snapshot of what's around us, it can give us information about that point and place. Now what's important for libraries is because that's now putting information and our level of information engagement and retrieval onto the physical world. Shifting slightly our major focus for where people engage information. So the question here for libraries and librarians is, what is going to be our role, or how can we sneak back into that information flow so that we're able to provide the important services and resources we have so that people engaging with augmented reality have the library or the librarian at their benefit there. Now I'm actually going to go backwards one slide. Something else I want to say about QR codes, or how QR codes really demonstrate this well, is this idea of being intimidated by new technologies. If you're not familiar with QR codes and you see this ridiculous jumble of gibberish, it can really set off alarms and immediately raise your barriers. That's definitely what happened to me. For instance, the first time I saw this, I was like, what is that and why would I care? But so I immediately turned on my my process for adapting to technology and realized, okay, this is something that's new to me, so I'm going to take the time to experiment with it, explore it, and play with it as a person. And then once I'm familiar with it, I looked at what the possible library applications might be. But I'm really aware, or I should be more aware, of what kind of reaction this can evoke with people who are totally new to it. And I'm not sure if they appreciate this or not, but my parents are always great tests for this. I show it to them and see what they say, see what their reaction is. It's very helpful to see what the normal people's reactions can be. And as long as I'm able to then explain why they may care, or why I may care may be important to the world, then they become willing to think about it. And that's really interesting to see how I consider things and communicate it is not going to be the same as it's going to impact other people. And so stepping out of my bounds, talking with people of different generations, is a huge help for that. Okay, another major trend that's absolutely blowing up in technology is location-based networks. We've seen social networks based on where you are, like Foursquare and Koala, really blow up over this last half year. Now, they're becoming hugely popular and they're getting a ton of attention, but they're not actually enjoying that much reach worthy of their attention. For instance, Foursquare, as popular as it is, does not yet have 1 million users. And my town, which I have a picture of here, which we rarely hear about, actually has probably reached 1.5 million users already, something that most of us are not aware of. What these are, this slew of tools or toys or games, are applications either for cell phones or smartphones, depending on how you input the information, where you can engage the location of where you're at. You're a place, an event, a locale, simply by checking in. You check in when you're there, just like you send a tweet when you do something. And that simple activity allows you to connect with that place and engage it. If it's a business, you can connect with it as a client and possibly receive benefits. But also, you get to connect with the other people there or in your own social network, so you can expand it or further enhance your interaction with each other. Some of the benefits vary between games, but overall, in general, the benefit, the reason for people doing this, is for the simple allure of being able to engage it. And that's something we really should understand. Just like with Twitter, the answer to why in God's name would people want to post tweets all day is because it's rewarding for us to engage and share information. Now, it's not just what we're doing, but also where we're doing our activities that we're doing there that can be fun for that. Each of these, though, is quite different. My town is much more based around being a game, where you compete with either yourself or strangers or a select group. It just recently opened up its networking features, where you can not just visit a place, but treat that place like you would in a Sims game, as a property that you can develop and you can build and you can own, and then receive the benefit of points or fake money within it. That's very different from Foursquare, whereas your reward for it is the competition with others, where you can compete to become mayor if you go to a locale many times, or to climb up the leaderboard. And Gowalla, a favorite of mine, is very similar to the Foursquare model, but offers more ways of interacting, whether it's trips or being able to pick up or drop off items at places. And so this is how it's like to engage with these as a person. And so then, putting our librarian caps on, trying to figure out how would we engage this as an information center. Now, one of the things we can do is go back to that theme of enhancing a local place with ways of engaging our mobile technology. So for instance, if we're going to go to the library and we're a Foursquare user, one of the first things we're going to do is check in at that library. Now the library doesn't have to be part of that if they don't want to. They don't even have to know about it. But there's a lot of benefit to actually actively engaging that. Promoting it, for instance, or rewarding people who do that. Now that's the biggest struggle I've had with this. As I've tried to pursue this, it's people not seeing how we can create rewards. A coffee shop can easily say, if you become mayor of the cafe, you get a free latte. But libraries are not based on that kind of capital. So we have to envision what rewards and incentives we may have for that. Now the reason we would want to pursue and think about those rewards is not just to drive that traffic and advertising like traditional businesses have to, but really to make sure that the library is within part of that mobile culture of our patrons. That's what's really key here. But the actual library-related and research-related points of location-based services are quite extensive. We know that, for instance, one of the most important ways that people discover or come across information or resources is within their social network, the Invisible College, their peer group of professors, or what have you. And that network nowadays is based quite often on location, on where we are and who's near us. So vendors may, for instance, be making recommendations about hot articles being read around you, for instance. Now, those were just a couple of them. And as we get to the end, let me know what you think I missed out, or what I passed, and I'll tell you if I did it on purpose and why. I'm going to jump now into what I think is a really central concept of information literacy in the mobile sphere. This graphic I have here is how I like to explain and envision the framework for mobile literacy. Mobile literacy can be conceived of as the skills that librarians pursue in order to be effective providing information resources within a world where mobile technology is becoming increasingly important. It's not just being aware of technology, of mobile technology, but also being able to apply our library services within that framework. Now, the three major points for mobile literacy are built upon, but not solely relying upon, knowing about and being familiar and fluent with the actual mobile technologies. That's one rung of the ladder, but it's not the most important. We have to know what mobile techs are out there, and we have to know how to use them, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. What is much more important, I think should be the central focus, is being aware of the actual impact of mobile technologies, not just on the library, although that should be the focus, but on the entire world, on the whole understanding of information engagement. And this has lots of implications and lots of conceptions. This includes understanding the role of mobile technology within engaging information, the value of it within research. It includes knowing how to critically evaluate and engage information that we encounter through mobile technologies or deal with within mobile technologies. It includes being able to engage information ethically and legally. It also includes the cultural and communication norms, understanding what it's like and why it's like that for engaging with information and people through mobile networks or mobile tools, teaching those same skills. Most importantly, it includes the flexibility for knowing how to and when to be flexible and adapt ourselves, our skills, our roles, and the nature of the services we provide. Which brings me to the third point of knowing how to apply it to library services and the skills that changes for us as librarians. So if we're going to be providing reference through mobile technologies, we have to have the skills for communicating through them, for knowing how to answer and receive text messages, for instance, how to engage Twitter, how to search Twitter, knowing what the major mobile resources are for our relevant library constituencies, and knowing what the search experience requires, what same skills we have with the online databases that do or do not translate to the mobile version. Some of the other skills that are really important for this would be knowing what the hierarchy and setup of information and important mobile tools are, and also the same thing but within tangential resources. Knowing what makes up the iTunes Apple Store, for instance, how the metadata is presented and how it's organized so that we can best encounter and discover the resources that we need. Also, another side of it is how we as librarians can facilitate access to resources through various mobile devices. Now, a related side to this is how the actual information flow itself is affected by mobile technology. Something critical for all of us librarians is considering how mobile technology impacts or influences or changes the information flow and scholarly communication. Some of the important questions we ask ourselves will be, what is research going to look like as more researchers and not just mobile natives are using mobile technology to discover information and apply it? We've always had to, almost by definition, be aware of and be involved in the shifts in information flow. And this change, this advent of mobile technology, is just another, though a very strong factor. So how is it changing that information flow? How is it changing search? How is it affecting the search experience and results when we are looking at a database through a mobile application? Knowledge management is changing. How are the tools and behaviors changing for that? How are our users collaborating differently over mobile technology? Are they contributing more through it now? And if so, how is that impacting publication? And of course, current awareness has so far been one of the biggest arenas for this. Through Twitter especially, current awareness has switched so much towards mobile alerts. And it's hard to figure out how the library is able to keep up with keeping within that flow. Now, I'm going to pack a lot into what should be the most important section of this, the practical considerations. Knowing about mobile technology, as we talked about, is really only part of the battle. Just as important is careful application and critical evaluations of mobile services and the applications of technologies within library services. Some of the general considerations we might think about would be being aware of the impact of mobile technology on staff as well as patrons, being aware of the impact of patron expectations on changing library operations, trying to consider best practices for whatever service it is we're looking to enhance in mobile technology from the beginning, before implementing. And this is really a hard point. The only way we know is by gaining personal and professional experience. But we have to make sure we have that as a factor for how we design mobile technology services before we really begin. So I think it's really critical for all of us librarians, for everyone to gain personal experience when we don't have it, to become fully mobile literate, fluent within the uses and functions and implications of different mobile technologies, so that as we engage it as an information provider, we already know what the side of it looks like for the information consumer. We already know what the patron expectations will be because we've decided to give time to engage that and learn that on our own. But where we learn that can be tricky because we can't all be expected to fully have the resources to commit to our own mobile literacy. Our institutions that we're a part of have to be able to provide that. We need to take it upon ourselves to keep up to date and to keep aware of current trends, but our institutions have to know how to make sure that we have the service skills relevant for this changing world. Now, of course, library schools also have a role in this, and to be able to change some of the competencies that we train our library students in so that it's relevant within mobile technology can be really key. Now, of course, mobile technology is a trend, and it's not a small trend. It's nothing that's going to go away, but it is something that's going to change and look very different. So as we design these considerations, these competencies for ourselves, we have to make sure that they're fluid and that we're investing in the future so that we don't have to just go through the process again and again. Some of the other considerations will be the changes this means for staff and on staff. Staff will have to do slightly different things. It will need some different skills, but also it means new pressures on us, and every pressure on staff is going to meet resistance and require resource to help and support. It's also going to mean an interesting tension on new staff. For instance, as librarians enter the workforce, we may have come from a place where we're much more familiar with mobile technology. And as mobile natives join our departments, it can be hard to balance their expectations versus those of traditional librarians. Examples of that can be everything from their use of mobile phones as note-taking devices in meetings, and others thinking that's rude because they think they're not paying attention, to figuring out how best to engage our patrons who have this different expectation of what's appropriate in real life. There's been lots of times where I've been multitasking, chatting with a colleague while at the same time engaging my mobile phone for whatever it may be. And my colleague thinking I'm not paying attention, whereas I feel like it was necessary for my efficiency to be doing both. So it's been really interesting to see how to bridge those tensions, how to maximize those tensions actually as points of productivity and innovation. And the same thing is bringing mobile technology into the workplace. There's lots of ways that we can use mobile technology to enhance library operations and staff workflows. But each of those can be very tricky. For instance, I recently proposed to my library that we purchase and use the Square product so that we can use an iPhone as a cash register to take mobile payments from credit cards from our patrons. That way, the circulation staff aren't tied to the desk. We don't have to have so much resources dedicated to that. But it didn't go anywhere because it didn't seem like even within the realm of something that would be important or necessary for our library, because our library never thought that it would be important to change the setup. But as we see physical changes demanding that, I thought that this would be a good way to adapt to it. But what I did wrong is I started with a suggestion without building a context of this change. So it was met with resistance, whereas it could have been a growth opportunity. Now, I've talked a lot about how to prioritize platforms, etc. But that goes for a lot of other things too. Not just which platform to develop mobile application for or which web browser, but also a little bit more deeply where to put the energy into meeting mobile technology. We should be thinking about a much larger strategy. How to fully enter, or maybe more strategically have the library enter the mobile culture of our patrons. And that's not just with building mobile resources or making our library presence more friendly to mobile technology, but also adapting our attitudes and policies so that we're not just mobile friendly, but mobile efficient. This can be everything from changing the restrictions of cell phones in libraries to maybe being more friendly and understanding of the role and the possible implications and applications of our mobile devices within legitimate research. Now we also have to be aware that each technology carries its own implications and considerations, and this can be a boon as well. When we decided to engage an iPhone for our library reference, we knew that we saw it have a lot of implications for the staff. And then we soon realized that that was a change opportunity. The fact that we could engage email, text messaging, and social networking through this one device made us realize maybe we didn't also have to be giving resources to a static reference desk. Maybe we can literally be wherever we need to be, wherever the information is or the patron is. That change takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of management for managing staff expectations. But it can mean a lot of profit for libraries able to meet new expectations for our patrons. Some of the other considerations we've realized is that things like mobile applications are not only important for libraries as possible platforms for our services, but also as resources for which we should be providing access. But providing access to these tools can be tricky, so it'll be fun figuring out how to best catalog mobile applications or include them in subject guides. It'll also be interesting to think about what role the iPad will play in changing expectations for information behavior and how libraries can maximize that from the beginning. So, although we've spent a lot of time talking about reacting to this trend and figuring out how to do that with success, we have also and continue to create and drive this trend ourselves. Now I mention this because it's really important for us to know that we can use our power, our skills, our expertise to actually guide and further push the development of mobile technology in libraries so they can be the best they can be for us and our users and for meeting our strategic goals. So I don't want us to forget that we don't just have to be reactionary to this technology trend. It's become a huge trend within libraries because we made it that. And so it's our responsibility to continue to do that, keeping our patrons in mind, making sure that we're using our power to make sure that libraries are doing the best that we can to be within the mobile information flow. So let's make that future, and let's make the future of mobile technology in libraries a bright one. We're doing great so far. So let's continue to explore this together, to make sure that we learn together, and let's take this opportunity to grow together for our own benefit and for that of our professional community. Thank you, and let's take some questions. Thank you for the applause. I appreciate that.
Questions, anybody? I guess I have one. Joe, are you looking into fundraising with mobile devices for your library?
Looking into, no. And I say that because it's an option that my library has not decided to pursue. A while back, I proposed something similar that we were told is not a priority we'll be pursuing. So the short answer is no. But also, I'm curious because your wording was, I think, about fundraising. And my original pursuit of this was more in the line of engaging it for mobile payments for places at which we're already having an interaction of money, for paying for library fines, etc., through mobile services. Not just for Square, but literally mobile services, whether it's text messaging, payment, or other. Now we could take the route of using it for donations, as some public libraries have begun to do. And I think that may be what you're referring to, but no, not yet. Have you guys seen any great examples of that or considerations for that?
This is confidential right now, but we are looking at doing a big pilot project with Give by Cell, and they're